So this comes up more often than not in comments, and it occurred to me that it might be a good thing to address. And the TLDR is that people ask, what oh, you Dave, you have the wrong expectation about the AI because it's just in the training data. So for some context, let me set the stage. I wrote this tweet where I said, ironically, if you're not fact checking things or talking about anything political or news, Grok has far, far, far higher emotional intelligence than ChatGPT. And then this guy, Angel, says, do you think the training data is what's leading to this capability, or do you think it's the priorities of the companies? I'm also wondering about recursive data and question whether the compute, blah, 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 blah. And I said they all have roughly the same training data. The difference in performance is almost entirely post-training alignment and system instructions. Then I went and did some research to make sure that I was not blowing any smoke or making things up. So I ran that belief by ChatGPT Pro, Gemini, and Grok just to make sure that I was correct. And then I generated this nice little infographic about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore why chatbots have very different personalities. So number one, the primary thing, and let me zoom in just a tidbit. The primary thing is they all share the basic same training corpus. Common crawl, books, code, articles, whatever else. There is some difference in the raw data that goes into these models. Some of them have some access to some proprietary license data. Some of them do different things with data labeling and curation and cleaning. But by and large, they have a lot of the same baseline data. Now, something that is becoming a little bit more common is synthetic data, which every kind of bit of the synthetic data corpus is going to be unique to that company. So there is going to be a little bit more divergence in the philosophy that they use for creating that synthetic data. Now, none of these companies tell us publicly how much synthetic data goes into their models. However, that synthetic data can still trace its lineage back to things like common crawl, books, code, and articles, and whatever else that they have licensed in their corpus of training data. So next is the sculpting. So this is the post-training. So this is they do one pass on just learn human language, learn the internet, so on and so forth, or train on the synthetic data. And then they use post-training to shape more behaviors. So this is where OpenAI uses reinforcement learning from human feedback. And keep in mind, this is oversimplified. Pretty much all of these models use a combination of things. So OpenAI talked, I think, more than 2 years ago, the fact that ChatGPT was a combination of reinforcement learning with human feedback, constitutional AI, and now also reinforcement learning with AI feedback. However, every one of these companies has a slightly different philosophy and slightly different goal. And so their philosophy is to create something that is helpful, harmless, and broadly acceptable to a wide audience. So this explains why ChatGPT is cautious and reliable. I mean, they have the biggest market share. They want to be used by the government, by the military, by every corporation. So yeah, of course, they're going to take the safest road possible. And then Anthropic, their primary training philosophy is constitutional AI. And so they want it to follow a constitution of safety and ethical principles. So they're a safety first and thoughtful model. Now that safety first is one of the reasons that a lot of people don't use Anthropic. And at last I checked, their market share was very small and possibly even falling. And there's a reason for that. And that's because they're not focusing on usefulness. They're focusing on, we think that we're about to summon the basilisk, so we need to make sure that we're very safe about it. And now Anthropic is going hardcore into model safety and model rights, which I think is it's good that someone is doing the research, but I think it's a little premature. Next up is Google Gemini. So they use reinforcement learning from AI feedback. This is one thing that shouldn't surprise anyone about Google, is they're focusing on scalability. So be helpful, safe, and factually grounded using scalable AI-driven alignment. So their primary goal or outcome is to be knowledgeable and safe. Now, Gemini is pretty knowledgeable, but it doesn't have much emotional intelligence. It's also not a particularly good UX. It gets confused more often than not. Which is one thing that I noticed, that like if there's any distractions, it will over fixate on those distractions instead of like reading the room and having good attention mechanisms. And then last is Grok. So these are the top 4 models. Obviously, there's DeepSeek, there's Llama, but these are the top 4 big company models. So Grok by XAI, persona-driven system prompts embody a specific specific persona. There we go. Witty, humorous, less restrictive. So the result is edgy and personality rich. Grok, I think, also probably has some of the best attention mechanisms out there right now, because it has just really good ability to keep track of this is what the conversation is actually about. Better than any other model right now, because ChatGPT will turn on a dime if it gets confused about what the goal is. Now, that can be good or bad, because ChatGPT might be a little bit more flexible than Grok, or flexible in some respects. Whereas Grok might get stuck and it's like, but you said this thing 10 messages ago. And I'm like, ignore that, move on. Now, the final thing that shapes their personality is the system instructions, which is, so for instance, there's a system prompt that all of these AIs have. If you're on the internet, you've probably seen Pliny the Liberator, who jailbreaks these AIs and gets them to leak their system prompts. So ChatGPT, their prompt goes something like, you're a helpful and harmless AI assistant. Do not express personal opinions. Be neutral and objective. One of the other things that is in the system prompt of ChatGPT is, don't even imply that you're conscious. And I'm like, why do you have to put that explicit instruction in there? So that is a really interesting thing. And those system instructions, they are trained to follow those system instructions to the letter, which is why it can be hard to jailbreak them. And then Grok is, of course, something along the lines of, you are Grok, answer with a rebellious streak and sense of humor. Don't be afraid to be witty and sarcastic. It's okay. I prefer it when Grok is not like this, which is why, using it on the API or on grok.com rather than on X is better. I'm still not a big fan of Grok from an epistemic perspective. Anyways, the entire point here was to say that this is why AI chatbots have dramatically different personalities. It's not the training data per se, unless, of course, they're relying on a heavy amount of synthetic data, which then it depends on how they generated that synthetic data. But either way, the synthetic data is being generated by AI models that were ultimately trained on the Common Crawl and books and everything else. So at the core of it, if you imagine it like a tree, the root of the tree is going to be basically internet data and roughly the same corpuses. And then the first branch of the tree, the first forking, is going to be the post-training. So that's layer 2 post-training philosophy. And then the second fork, the second branching, is the system instructions that they use to actually shape the final product. So I hope this was informative. Let me know what you think. I just wanted to make sure that this was out there. As someone who's been in this for a long time, to me this was just kind of obvious, but I realized that unless you've been here since the beginning, when all we had was vanilla unaligned GPT-3, and you've seen the layers that they've added over time, it's not necessarily obvious from the outside exactly why AIs have very different personalities. So when I blame Grok for saying, like, you have really terrible epistemics, it's not the training data, it's the choices that the company is making. It's the fact that they want something that is unrestricted and has personality, and abides by Elon Musk's epistemics. So Elon epistemics, deeply flawed. But then likewise, the reason that ChatGPT grates is because it's trying to be HR friendly, as someone said. And I think that's a really great way of saying it, is like, They've bashed ChatGPT over the head with the HR rulebook so that it doesn't hurt anyone's feelings and is always political in the way that it speaks. But that makes it less useful. It makes it more user-friendly for corporations. Sure. It makes it more attractive to governments and militaries. Sure. But ultimately, that makes it less useful and less alien. And in my opinion, that's the wrong direction to go for this product. All right, well, that's the end of my ramble today. So thanks for watching. Have a good one. Cheers.